Hello and welcome to EPR with your favorite environmental enthusiasts, Nic and Laura. On today's episode, Laura and I discuss our nostalgic comfort foods. We talk to Jaclyn Wegner about aquarium conservation, modeling behaviors, and program accessibility. And finally, seals are related to bears, skunks, and badgers. In 2007, a nearly complete skeleton of a new semi-aquatic carnivore from an early Miocene lake deposit in Nunavut, which is a farther northern province in Canada, was discovered and became known as an evolutionary link between those land mammals and seals. How about that? Super cool. Hit that music. Come join us for the 2023 NAEP Annual Conference and Training Symposium in Phoenix, Arizona from May 7th to 10th. Enthusiastic environmental professionals from across the country gather each year at NAEP's conference to share in the opportunity to learn about new projects, share technical knowledge, network with other industry professionals, and engage with leaders in environmental technologies and practice. Additionally, EPR is going to be the keynote on Tuesday, May 9th at 8 a.m. Very excited to do that. Really happy to have the opportunity. Check out more at www.naep.org, and we hope to see you out there. Last but not least, Laura is not here today, so I don't have to do a funny sponsor bit. For some reason, she also thought I was in Germany, which is really hilarious, but I wasn't. So that'll come up in our next interview. But for now, head on over and check out our sponsor options. Like I say, this show has been really great, really fun to do, and it's a wonderful opportunity to reach your target audience. Check us out at www.environmentalprofessionalsradio.com for more details. Now let's get to our segment. I was telling somebody the other day that like one of my nostalgia foods is SpaghettiOs. Right, it's just spaghetti. It's like we just grew meatballs. Without meatballs, actually. And it's just, that's what we grew up with. It was cheaper and it was just like, it was efficient, delicious, right? Yeah. And so years later, I think I was in grad school and this person's like, well, what's your comfort food? And I'm like, oh, it's, if I eat a bowl of that, it'll make me happy, right? Yeah. So she's like, oh, I've never had it before. So she gets it, pours it into a bowl, heats it up, does all the things. Like, oh, this is terrible. I mean, I can see how you could like it, but it's awful. And I'm like, well, that's a way to compliment. And yeah, it's not good, but it makes me happy, Well,
it's like asking somebody to go back and watch The Breakfast Club. It may or may not hit right anymore.
At the time it was wonderful, but
no, we used to hot dogs. We chop up some hot dogs and put them in our SpaghettiOs.
Yeah, heck yeah. Definitely did that. 100% did that. Yeah. And then it was better than the meatball version, in my opinion.
Right? Totally. That's what we would do.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny.
So were you a raw hot dog eater or cooked?
Always cooked, I guess. I didn't know you could eat them raw.
Yeah, I liked raw hot dogs.
I was about to say, you have to be raw because you wouldn't ask the question.
I know.
But I loved all hot dogs. I mean, it doesn't matter where it came from, how long it's been sitting, wherever it is. I would eat any of it. If it was pink or whatever, I didn't care. It was delicious. Like my grandfather would boil them until they burst.
Right.
And they were still delicious. It was like, we just called them pap dogs, that's just what they were. So,
Pap dogs.
Yeah.
I need someone to open a restaurant called that.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah. His name was Al. He was a gem, absolute gem. He had a notebook of jokes and it was just the worst puns. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, any kind of hot dog, I would eat it. I would eat it all. And I really love these, there's this gas station hot dog place near where I grew up. And it was, they can't be good. They were literally pink, like pink hot dog.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, but
I don't think I ever ate a gas station hot dog in my life.
Well, it was kind of more like, it was like the precursor. It was called Bob's Market. So it was a market that just happened to have gas. They're kind of like a country store.
Oh, I know. We have in Dunedin where I grew up, there's a Dodge's store. Their thing was chicken, but they had the hot dogs and stuff too.
Same kind of thing. And I wouldn't have cared what else they had. I was eating those hot dogs. I was getting 2 of them, and I was ketchup only at the time. I don't even think I liked mustard then.
And shout out to Dodge store because it's still there.
Honestly, I don't know if Bob's Market still is. Oh my gosh. I hope it is. What a nostalgia trip.
I'm trying to think. Do you know what else we used to eat? I don't know if anybody else ate this. Brunschwager. When I learned what that was, like I ate that for years before I knew what it was. And then when I found out what it was, I stopped eating it. It was like one of the first things on my road to vegetarianism. It was one of the first things I stopped eating. That and fish sticks.
It's just this nondescript food. Like, what is this I'm eating? I have no idea. They say it's fish.
It's cat food. It's basically goose liver.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, it's cat food. It's disgusting.
What was it called?
Like, Mom, what? Brunschwager?
Brunschwager. Yeah, yeah.
That's German. That's how we said it.
Is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And then when I was old enough to figure out what that was, I was like, Mom, you're feeding us freaking cat food. What is this?
Parents. Yeah.
And I don't know why I do have German heritage on my mom's side, so that could be why. I'm really not sure.
I mean, but see, I have it on my dad's side. I didn't get that.
Yeah. Okay. Final question for you: mayonnaise or Miracle Whip?
Oh, I mean, I would say mayonnaise. I never did Miracle Whip, but I didn't like it as a kid. Like it was never. I was basic as a kid. I was like, I need hot dogs, hamburgers, no onion, no cheese, chicken fingers, French fries. That was like my whole diet as a kid. And it's actually kind of hilarious now because it's the opposite. I love all food.
Right, yeah.
I want it to be chaotic, Give me the spices.
I was very picky.
Yeah. But yeah, I was like, can we go to Howard Johnson's and get a bite to eat? Which I don't even know if they still have food or still do that or even still exist.
Hojo? I don't know.
Yeah, I used to. And that was like my go-to catchphrase was, can we get a bite to eat? And that was me saying I wanted chicken fingers. So, yeah.
Yeah, we were a Miracle Whip household for sure.
Yeah, I don't think anybody in our house really ate mayonnaise, just in general. Like it wasn't a big in ours.
Yeah, no, it went on our bologna sandwiches and our Brunschwager sandwiches all the time.
Funny. I mean, I used to love like the thick cut bologna, like Oscar Mayer or whatever.
That's like fancy.
Is it? I don't know.
We didn't have thick cut bologna.
It was not expensive. I think bologna in general is a lower tier meat, but I didn't care. I loved it. I would eat it just by itself. And yeah, there's some, yeah. But as a kid, I remember like trying to make faces in the bologna when I would take bites, give it like an eyes and mouth. And I'm like, I'm a monster.
Good times. Good times.
You're a kid. What are you going to do? Oh, what a nostalgia trip that was. Wow. Do we get it all?
I know, right? Now I'm like, what do I got in my cupboard? I have nothing in my cupboard that's anything like any of that food.
Oh, I know. Same here. And now I'm kind of sad,
Right. Well, my nieces and nephews are visiting in July. So
you have an excuse.
My time to shine, except I have to get all vegetarian versions of the things that I used to like. So.
Hey, that's better now than it was. Okay. So
yeah. And the Brunschwager cat food is not making any reappearances.
That sounds terrible.
I know, right? Okay. Shout out to everyone who's still eating that stuff. Let's get to our interview.
All right.
Welcome back to EPR. Today we have Jaclyn Wegner, Director of Conservation Action at Shedd Aquarium in Chicago, Illinois, on the show. Welcome, Jaclyn.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I am really excited to have you here. You're our first aquarium person, as far as I can remember. And I love your job title, so I can't wait to hear more about your work. Nick also is going to be very jealous he's missing this because he just loves animal encounters and you have stories of penguins. So he's still in Germany, which I'm sure he's having a blast, but he will still be sad that he's missing out on this conversation.
Oh, we miss you, Nick.
The first thing I need to ask you, though, we had this debate during the Ask Me Anything that we did with some of our past EPR guests a few weeks ago. What's your thoughts on Chicago style pizza versus other types of pizza?
Oh my goodness. I didn't know you were going to start with such a heavy hitter.
I know, right? I told you. I was like, no, there's nothing too heavy in here you're going to be surprised with, except that one.
That's so funny. I feel like Chicagoans really have such a split kind of, I don't know, a lot of different opinions on this. I really do like deep dish pizza, which is, like native to Chicago, but it is like a special occasions kind of pizza. I have it maybe once a year or every couple of years. So I do think for Chicagoans, it's like a once in a while special treat. It is certainly not what we're having as regular pizza. I love like a thin crust pizza. So let that be known on the record. It's all delicious, though. Chicago does have excellent pizza. And I know people who have moved out of Chicago and just talk about how much they miss it, including my parents. I always offer to send them pizza from Chicago. I haven't actually done that yet, but it's a possibility for those out there.
Right. You can freeze order it. I have a friend who is actually in conservation in Florida, and she would go visit Chicago once a year and then bring 10 of them back with her frozen.
That's commitment. Right. I love that. It is good.
To have a pizza party is great.
All
right. Well, enough about that. Let's talk about what are your responsibilities at the aquarium currently?
Yeah. So as Director of Conservation Action, I oversee a team of about 5 or 6 folks. And we lead a number of different programs for Shedd to connect different audiences with taking action for animals. So as Conservation Action, we do things like host local volunteer events like cleanups and habitat restoration. We also provide some support for communities and small businesses to be more sustainable, especially in reducing plastic and sourcing sustainable seafood. And we work with other Shedd departments and external partners to kind of just organize and connect the dots around conservation action so we can prioritize ways that we can make a greater impact for local waterways around the Chicago area, around the broader region of the Great Lakes and beyond. That's
great. So the aquarium is located on the southwest side of Lake Michigan, right?
It is. It's right on the shore of Lake Michigan. So there are some areas in the aquarium when you peek outside and you're almost disoriented. I was just looking at a whale that I know is native to the ocean that within the aquarium. And then you look outside and you see Lake Michigan and this big, beautiful, huge lake. That's an awesome asset for us to sit right on.
Yeah, that's really cool. Are there any resident animals that are local to the area?
In the aquarium?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have a Great Lakes exhibit that helps to highlight local species. So we have lake sturgeon that you can actually touch. It's like a touch tank. We have beautiful brook trout and snapping turtles. And we also have a few invasive species on exhibit, which is kind of interesting, like Asian carp or invasive carp. And what's the other one I'm thinking? Some different crayfish and things. Oh, lamprey was the one I was thinking about too, that are fascinating. They have a sucker vacuum mouth it's like a parasitic animal. So we have those on exhibit so people can kind of learn about some of the threats to the Great Lakes.
Cool. So, all right, you've got the local animals from around the world. I'm not going to put you on for how you source those animals or anything, but more working on your conservation stuff. You work outside of the aquarium, correct?
A lot of my team's work is outside of the aquarium. Yeah. And, a lot of the aquarium's efforts and our industry more broadly is also around sustainable breeding of animals within our facilities. So that might be something kind of interesting to dive into as far as, really trying to have a pretty minimal environmental footprint, but still have animals on exhibit that can connect people to wild counterparts. But conservation action, for the most part, is a lot of work outside of the aquarium. So it's kind of an interesting balance of connecting to the aquarium's goals and kind of leveraging having animals on exhibit for people to meet and connect with, but then also trying to drive that to get people to take action in their communities.
Right. So what are some of those conservation issues that are related maybe to the Great Lakes that you're working on?
Yeah, high level, we have 3 big conservation priorities at Shedd: addressing climate impacts, addressing degraded ecosystems, and addressing overharvesting of things like fisheries. And so that all kind of trickles down then to what we do around the Chicago area. So when it comes to climate impacts, we're looking to support policies and practices that are reducing carbon footprint around especially the Chicago and Great Lakes area. My team's focus is a lot around the habitat degradation piece, though. So, doing a lot of habitat restoration and connecting volunteers with each other and with nature to try to build skill set and build commitment within our communities to continue to kind of protect, preserve, and expand natural areas. Chicago is a big city, and so we actually do have tons of parks and a lot of green space, but it is still constantly under threat. And there's a lot of industry in the city as well. And so there is a lot of organizing and kind of building a public, desire for more green space and looking for harmony with local wildlife. So there's a lot there for us to learn about and try to support.
Right. That's really awesome. Do you feel like these are the kinds of programs that a lot of aquariums and zoos are picking up now and kind of expanding, outside of their walls and into more of we need to support the habitat these animals should be living in?
I think so. Absolutely. I think that, I've been in the zoo and aquarium industry for maybe 15 or so years. And even during that time, I've seen a lot of evolution in zoos and aquariums investing more and more in conservation work outside of their walls. And I think that it's really something that we see as our responsibility, to better protect and preserve kind of the wild counterparts of the animals in our care. But it's also very much, what the public expects of us and is demanding of us. I think people still really do love coming to these institutions to have kind of family-friendly experiences, to kind of experience joy. And we saw this especially actually during COVID, that people really were looking to our organizations for just times of relaxation and fun. But we also are seeing our visitors and the public expect more of us, that we're actually, doing more beyond just being a place to visit. So I think it's both. Yeah, it's just kind of this good combination of pushing us to invest more and more in this kind of work.
That's great. Do you feel like, so I know when I have worked with people, or just being an environmental person and being an environmental scientist, I've had conversations with people, and I'm not even working in the zoo or an aquarium. I did volunteer though at great educational zoo in Florida called Lowry Park. And, you always get the people who are like, oh, zoos are terrible. And I just saw a post the other day about dolphins in captivity and things. Do you find yourself often having to explain or talk about the work and how it's, beneficial for education, or how the animals are actually treated?
Sometimes, I think that more often with my team's work, since we are in communities and in nature, we often do interact with people who just see Shedd as a place that they got to visit when they were younger, and just kind of come to us with a pretty open mind and are just excited to say, like, I didn't know Shedd does this kind of work. And so I think more often when we're in the field, we're faced with people who are excited to kind of bring in their personal experience of having come to the aquarium, having positive memories. I think it's just a unique way for us to say, like, to value the past and the experiences that people have had, and then say, and how can we meet you where you are to actually, are there things that you can do in your community to help these kinds of animals and to take part in conservation and sustainability efforts? And so it's kind of an interesting, like, we're a trusted voice, we're an institution in Chicago. And so while for some conservation organizations, there might be some barriers to connecting with people, we actually see that there's a lot more connection with people seeing Shedd as a place that's like a family-friendly, trusted spot in Chicago that they grew up coming to. So I think that's kind of more what our experience is in the field. That's awesome. That's good to hear. I do feel like it's more one of those zoos like Lowry Park. They always have their bad PR and stuff, that things come out, like anytime you have animal care, things happen. Yeah. Because people love animals. They get connected to them. I think that our industry has improved, especially around PR, to find a way of being really transparent. I worked at Lincoln Park Zoo before I came to Shedd Aquarium, which is another Chicago organization. And there was a lion that was really old, like he was elderly, and he was able to live to an older age because of the excellent care he got in a zoo. Like if he was living in the wild, he would probably be having a hard time finding food and taking care of himself. And so he lived to be a pretty old age, but he was also really beloved by the community. And so I remember the zoo spending years on PR communications to say, we know that people are really connected to this animal. How can we be really transparent that he's getting older? He's not going to last forever, to live on forever. Right. And so they really turned it into a celebration of his life in a way that I felt just was really transparent and really helped bring people along, where, instead of it being like a negative PR experience of people just feeling like, my goodness, I'm so upset about this death, it was something that people were able to celebrate his long life instead. Yeah. I mean, I do think it's good for people to keep the zoos and aquariums in check so that they are, holding themselves to the highest standards possible. Mm-hmm. And again, back to the work that you're doing. Do you have any current projects you want to talk about a little more in depth? Yeah. A project I've been working on the last couple of years is on the Chicago River, which is, river that cuts right through the city of Chicago, of course. And, but over the last couple 100 years, it's been industrialized quite a bit. Like the natural shorelines were really channelized, steel walls were put in place, which really helped for things like barge traffic. But over the years, as just transportation and industry has changed, the river's not used nearly as much for things like barge traffic anymore. But we have these legacy things like these steel walls and structures, and also a lot of just contamination in the river. And so we've been trying to figure out some different resources that the aquarium has that we can help to restore the river. And I think just, again, the nature of being the aquarium, we have a research team that has been assessing fish populations in the river and kind of helping us to see some different parts of the river that kind of are ready for a boost in habitat restoration and improvement. We also have programmers and educators who have been bringing people out on kayak and out to do birding and community science. And we also have been doing some hands-on restoration with some other partners. The Chicago Park District and an organization called Urban Rivers are a couple of our core partners. So we're restoring the river and then doing research and connecting people to it. So it's just this cool model of we're using Shedd strengths and resources around understanding animal needs, animal biology and conservation. And we're bringing that right to this location on the Chicago River. So it's a pretty urban spot. It's surrounded by a few pretty culturally diverse neighborhoods. So we're also working with those neighborhoods to understand, how would they like to access the river? How can we provide things like language translation and transportation to get them to the river's edge? And so this work really kicked off in 2022. And as spring is coming along, I'm just really excited to get back out in the parks and in the field and spend some more time on the restoration and connecting with community members out there.
Awesome. That just sounds really fun. And speaking of which, I think your combination of degrees, your bachelor's in integrative biology and master's in education from DePaul University, just seem like the perfect combination for the work that you're doing. So I was curious if you'd always wanted to work in zoos and aquariums, or is that just where the path led you after you took those programs?
Yeah, I had, like so many of us, I had kind of this windy path to get to where I am. As I was graduating undergrad with my biology degree, I remember going to my counselor and saying, I don't know what I want to do. I loved studying biology, but I don't know that I want to go right into grad school or go work in a lab. I remember thinking those were my two options. And I even asked them at the time as I don't know, how old are you at that point? Like 21. And I'm like, I've always liked Shedd Aquarium. Is there anything that I could do there? And he was just like, I'm not sure. Let me ask around. I'll get back to you. And he never did. And so I just sort of let that idea go. And I went to the University of Illinois, which is a couple hours south of Chicago, but it was just kind of in my mind of okay, well, then maybe I'll just let that go. Since I was so just interested in science, I was just really curious. And I guess that kind of translated to wanting to be an educator. I was also working at things like summer camps during college. And so working with kids, and it was easy for me to get things like internships and some basic jobs running. It was I'm trying to remember the name of my after school science club that I ran at a school, but it was just the Science is Cool Club or something. And so I was just sort of building off of my curiosity and excitement for science. But I got a job where I was running workshops for teachers, and I was teaching them on a curriculum around science education. And I just quickly got to a point where I was like, I'm teaching these teachers, but I don't really know a lot about pedagogy and about how learners learn. And so I decided to go back to get my master's in education. And so that really launched me into informal education. In the last handful of years, I've then transferred that into, not just education for the sake of education, but translating that into action. So I do really like kind of where I'm at and how I've moved through those degrees and the background to be prepared for being an educator, but really translating it to things that are applied to environmental issues today.
That's really great. How do you feel like those pedagogy that you've learned, are there any specific tools or, tips or tricks that you use that are helpful?
Yeah, I think back to what I learned in that program, and I also just keep building on it today. One of the topics I'm super interested in is conservation psychology and just how we learn in a social setting. And that was something that I remember learning a lot about in that master's program, that there's a concept called the zone of proximal development, where when you are hanging out with people who are more advanced than you in some topics or skills, you will kind of flex up to learn from them and with them. And it's actually commonly discussed around early childhood, when you have like a group of kids with like a mix of different skill sets and age and maturity levels, they'll learn from each other and kind of flex to kind of, we think of like the younger kids tagging along with the older kids, but it makes me think the same about, conservation psychology in the way that we are social beings. We learn a lot from each other and are influenced a lot from each other. And commonly with things like environmental behaviors, we know that you are more likely to change a behavior if you see your neighbor doing it or somebody who's in your network versus a scientist telling you this is the right thing to do. So I do kind of love, I'm not an expert in all of this, but it's something that I'm really enjoying just learning more about because it's really meaty and really, I think my background in education helps me understand kind of what behavior change or engagement around conservation can look like.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really love that because I feel like that is something, as part of the NAEP and being a environmental professional or, just agreeing to whether you're part of NAEP or not, just like knowing that you are a person with this knowledge. It's so important to demonstrate and to be the person who does do the things that everyone else should be doing so that people don't just hear it, but they also see it. When I go to like an environmental event or somewhere where people are supposed to be doing sustainable things and someone brings 24 pack of plastic bottles, it's like, no,
I know.
to be doing that.
Right.
We're supposed to lead a different way. Right. So yeah, that's very cool. I love that topic.
Yeah, no, that's a good example. I know it's like it can be harder, but modeling the way and just kind of like that people see, like we all, see what each other's doing and can be inspired, even just for like backyard parties that my husband and I host, we always put out our compost and like label it. And we get compostable things if we have to get like cutlery, and just love doing that as just something that we're showing our friends that we care about, and to just show that, composting is something that you can do at home or you can, get a compost service too. So it's just kind of like a fun, passive way to just model that.
Yeah, it's good. It gets people to pay attention and to ask questions. People don't really know that they can do it or should do it till they experience it. I almost had a heart attack when my mom told me she was getting a bidet. Not for environmental reasons, but I'm like, where did you even get exposed to that?
Yeah.
But, it was like, okay, well, if my mom can do it, I need to do it, so like that kind of stuff. It's like, you never know who's going to be the person you influence.
Totally. Yeah. And again, we're so social. So to be like, oh, I wouldn't have thought about that, but now I can ask you questions. Like, what do you like about it? How's it work for you? Okay. Can I envision myself doing that? Yeah. I think the social context is just so huge for all of us to kind of understand and embrace and have fun with connecting with each other while we're, going through our lives and trying to figure out what aspects of sustainability work for us. So yeah, there's a lot of meat there to dive into.
Right. So continuing on your career path line, how did you get your first role in the aquarium? I know this is a coveted position. There's limited roles within an aquarium and only probably one person who does what you do. So do you have some tips for people who might be looking like yourself, someone who's in college going, I want to work at the aquarium someday? Like, what advice would you have for them?
Yeah, no, it is a tough industry. And, for one, I recognize often that, across the US, there are a lot of zoos and aquariums. So I do see a lot of colleagues jump between cities and between institutions to find job opportunities. So that's kind of, a tough thing, but an opportunity to look, beyond just where you're from. But, so my first role when I was working at Lincoln Park Zoo, managing education programs, and then I transitioned over to Shedd, and my title was Great Lakes Partnerships Manager. It was a unique role where the Shedd Aquarium had formed a partnership network with 9 zoos, aquariums, and science centers around the Great Lakes. So I was brought on to kind of help manage some of like the shared programming and the partnerships. It was kind of an interesting inroad. And it was one that when I saw the posting, I was like, I don't think that applies for me. So maybe that's even a tip to sometimes just like, I had applied for a different job. And then they asked me to apply for this Great Lakes Partnerships Manager. So sometimes I think conservation jobs can just be a little like, it helps to actually kind of tease out what is this actually about. So I came to Shedd and was managing those kind of conservation related partnerships. And then there was a bit of reorganization in our department. And I started managing more of our programs, our local programs, like our Action Days program, which is our volunteer events around the Chicago area, and kind of just elevated into a bit of this broader role now as the director. So I do chat with members of my team or others at Shedd or others around Chicago with some regularity to kind of talk about, what it looks like to get into conservation action. And, one thing is that there are a lot of different elements of conservation action. There are people who want to be in the field and they want to do habitat restoration. There are ways of either being more of like a technician and like maybe be working for a contractor around that kind of restoration work. But there's also the kind of public engagement side of things, which my team leans much more into. So we are doing much more community engagement, running our volunteer events, yes, to have an environmental impact, but also to have an impact on the people who are coming out, and so that they're learning about local natural areas and just kind of feeling inspired and connected to take action. But there are other things too around conservation action that folks can lean into. So if you're less a field, wanting to be out in the elements all the time, there are so many different paths to go. Another big area of our work is around plastic pollution and working on the reduction end. So we do beach cleanups, but we know that we can never keep up with the trash that's ending up in the river and in the lake. And so we also do a lot around prevention. And so that looks like supporting local restaurants in their plastic reduction. And that's a little more B2B, more of like operationalizing strategies for reducing plastic within restaurants and communities. So I really do think there are different ways of kind of finding focal areas, and whether it's volunteering to get experience in those things or getting involved with local coalitions, there are ways of kind of getting experience to get yourself to a place that you're qualified to jump into one of these roles.
Excellent. Yeah, volunteering, always trying to get people out there and volunteer. If you want to work somewhere, get around those people.
Yeah, I know it's tough because we don't all have time to volunteer all the time. So I do think, our industry and others are looking at providing more paid internships and opportunities for people to ensure that they're, be compensated for their work and not always just having to volunteer to move up. But it just is part of the opportunities that are available, is that there are ways to volunteer to at least just get some of that initial experience and see if it's even something that you like.
Right, exactly. Which kind of leads me to another question about your programs. I know that you've got some initiatives, and it's probably something that you've seen change over the last 15 years is the accessibility and who programs are for. Do you want to talk about how maybe those things are changing in some programs you have going on, or how you're reaching a broader audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially as many conservation orgs since 2020 have been really reflecting and sometimes not even just reflecting, but really kind of disrupting their operations and trying to figure out how they can advance equity, inclusion, and access. We've been doing that with our conservation action programs for sure at Shedd. One of the things that we've made a bit of a shift to do is better understand the people who are living close to some of our conservation sites and trying to assess if they're actually coming to our programs or if we're bringing people from outside that community. And if we're not getting local folks, trying to understand why not and how can we lower barriers or kind of understand where they might be coming from. So one of the examples, we've been doing a program called Paddle and Plants. We bring people out on canoe. They're wearing waders, and it's just like a shallow stretch of a nearby river called the Little Calumet River that's kind of just outside the Chicago city limits. So people paddle to a site, they step out in waders, and then they can plant these plants to help with erosion and like habitat development along the river's edge. But one of the sites where we're working at it's in a primarily Black community. It's on the south side of Chicago. A lot of the people we're seeing around the park had no idea that there was access to the river there. So as we're chatting with them in the park, we started to realize that if people don't even know the river's here, they may not have ever gotten out on the river. Not to mention, are they going to come out and volunteer on a paddle and plant? Mm-hmm. So we've kind of pulled way back and have been working with our partner, Friends of the Chicago River, to bring people out just to experience paddling and just to see what canoeing is about. So last summer, we hosted a couple just learn to paddle events where we were doing flyering in a couple of the local spots around the park, and also just chatting with people directly who are like walking the park and exercising and inviting them just to come paddle. For those of us who have kayaked or canoed before, a lot of us have such good experiences. It's beautiful and peaceful, and it's just a unique way to see a waterway. So for us to kind of break things down a bit and say, we just want to bring these people out to paddle. Like maybe they'll come back for the next paddle and plant event, or maybe they'll just have this experience and hopefully think positively about the river and their park and just kind of expand their mind a little bit about what this space is about. Yeah, I think that's just a really kind of narrow example, but kind of indicative of this, maybe a strategy of breaking things down and really meeting people where they're at and understanding that people of different cultural backgrounds may have fear around water. They may not have had access to experiences. They may not have time because it's something like that they just aren't able to fit into their schedule. So we're really trying to adjust some of our programs in whatever targeted way to meet communities and just be more thoughtful about how we're, inviting people into being part of these experiences with us.
Yeah, that's really awesome. I mean, nature is therapy, and there's entire populations of people who don't have access to this free therapy.
Yes, absolutely.
Another population who's paying hundreds, thousands of dollars for a therapist. And then there's people who could, if they even knew the river was there, could be going out and having some healing that they may need. So it's really good work. I'm glad that you guys are doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm going to ask you this question, and you don't have to answer. Can you talk about your short experience with SeaWorld? I saw on your LinkedIn that you went over to SeaWorld for just a little bit. Yeah.
That was the first kind of zoo aquarium site that I worked at. So there's a broad industry association called the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. And so SeaWorld was the first kind of in that realm. I worked there for about 4 months. I was trying to remember. It was quite a while ago. As my ex-partner got a job in Florida, I followed. I got there and I was like, what do I do? I'm from Chicago, but I don't really know what kind of opportunities are in Florida. And we were based near Orlando, which is such a unique spot, both ecologically, like we got to go and see manatees and we had like snakes in our yard, which was cool. But then also it's a unique spot because there's like Disney and SeaWorld and all of Universal Studios and all these places there. So I, at that point, had a couple of years out of college and was working in informal science education. And so I got a job as an interpreter, like an educator. SeaWorld at the time had an educator at every animal exhibit. So, and then we would rotate every hour. Okay. So we would, give chats either on the mic or informally and just be there to answer questions and chat with folks about the animals. So I learned a lot about, of course, the animals that were there. And also, just per our discussion about, zoos and aquariums, just got to kind of see one version of what this kind of institution looks like. And so, I was there for a few months and got to learn a lot. And then I ended up coming back to Chicago. And that's when I started working at Lincoln Park Zoo.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you got that experience. And I'm glad you got to experience Orlando. All parts of Florida are interesting, but that part near the Magic Kingdom is definitely, it's a unique space in the world.
Yeah.
All right. Well, now it's time for field notes. And this is the part of the show where we talk to our guests about their memorable or funny or interesting moments doing the work that they do in the field. And we encourage our listeners to share their stories using the hashtag field notes so that we can read them on future episodes. And I am excited to hear this one because this is what I think Nic is going to miss the most. I'm sure you have lots of stories for working in the zoo and with animals, but I would love for you to share the one that you shared with me earlier.
Animals always pose this opportunity and they're unpredictable. So you try to, I don't do a lot of work with program animals these days in my role, but I have had many years of working with program animals where you're presenting a snake for kids to touch and see what they feel like, or getting to see an armadillo up close. But at SeaWorld, one of my more memorable experiences was there's a really cool exhibit showing off all sorts of aquatic birds like puffins and penguins. And every day there would be like a pop-up trivia opportunity where you just ask whoever's in the building at that time to answer a trivia question, and whoever gets it right gets to do a penguin encounter, like there on the spot. So people are just so thrilled when they are chosen to do this. My job as the educator I was like, okay, I take the person back to meet with the animal care specialist and they get to meet this penguin up close. And it was right when we were about to pose for a photo with the guest and the penguin projectile pooped all over the woman's front of her shirt and it went down her shirt. It was just really not just a small bit.
I would have died.
I know. And I'm I'm responsible for, or I am, but I'm not. That's right. An animal and you get to do this thing. And penguins have really gross, wet poop.
They eat fish.
Yeah, exactly. So it also smells fishy.
Right.
This woman was so sweet though. She actually, I feel like she saw it as like a souvenir or as like, now I get to tell my friends. So we ended up giving her like a souvenir t-shirt, washing hers for her so she could pick it up later in the day. And she got to walk away with a story to tell. So these are the kinds of things that are pretty common with unpredictable animals. And yeah, it was gross.
Yeah. It's just so funny. Like you said, they're unpredictable. You never know. And I know that exhibit too. I'm going to be mindful the next time I am anywhere near those penguins.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness. They're so cool. But yeah, you got to be careful when you're getting close.
Well, that's great. Your job sounds like a ton of fun. But, what do you like to do when you're not working?
I try to balance and not do too much environmental stuff when I'm not working. Like I used to also volunteer in my neighborhood a lot and do like environmental work. And so the last couple of years, I've been trying to kind of find a little more balance and do some other things outside of work that kind of fill my cup. My husband and I do a lot of camping and biking, traveling. We recently went to Joshua Tree, which is beautiful. So got some big hikes in there. So yeah, we spend a lot of time outside and it's interesting because we live in Chicago, so we have access also to, great food and great resources in Chicago that we get to explore as well.
Awesome. That's very exciting. Now I have another reason there's an NAEP chapter there. So any Chicagoans listening, you're all my reasons to visit, but I have one more.
Yeah, for sure. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Especially with spring, like all the outdoor patios are opening up and, everyone is like taking off all their layers of black and just like smiling at each other and getting excited to see all the flowers around the neighborhood. It's just a great time to be in the city.
Right. It's the same here in Syracuse, although we don't have a big giant city like you have. So it's a little different. And the minute you said, hopefully you can't hear it, but the minute you said spring, someone's lawnmower started over here. Oh.
I said it. Spring. That's the sign. Yeah. We all have our windows open and have to listen to all that noise. Yeah.
Right. Well, this has been fun. We're running out of time. Is there anything else you want to talk about that we missed?
Not really. No, it's been fun talking, and I hope that folks will maybe just, consider, visiting your local zoo or aquarium sometime and also get to know that next layer of work that they might be doing. So many people just are actually really surprised when they hear that we do conservation work and that it's so expansive and that it's such an investment financially and resource wise. So yeah, I hope this might interest some folks in kind of digging a little deeper and seeing what their local zoo or aquarium is doing in the realm of conservation.
That's perfect. Yeah, I just visited the Florida Aquarium, which similarly is on the water in the Tampa area. And they have a penguin exhibit.
Yeah. I've not been, but I know people who work there. I've got to get to that aquarium at some point.
It's very reputable.
Yeah,
I do too.
I think they do a lot of great conservation as well. Yeah,
exactly. I think they're the similar model. I think that they're doing a lot more programs, and I think they have a ferry or something that they take people out on.
I heard that. Yeah, for like dolphin viewing even or some other
something like that. Cool. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, for sure. I think that is a great way and place for people to volunteer if they're looking for a way to get a foot in the door or just get some environmental experience on their resume. That's another thing too that I see as a career coach all the time is, okay, your resume looks great, but you got to do something. So that's it. They might have more things than you think than just checking people in or something.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, the last thing I need to ask you is where people can get in touch with you.
Yeah. I can share my email. It's Wegner, JWEGNER @Shedd Aquarium, which is SHEDD Aquarium. So 2 Ds. I'm also on LinkedIn and would love to have people connect with me if they're interested in just connecting or hearing anything more about my work.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This has been really fun.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate the opportunity. Thanks for chatting.
Okay. That's our show. Thank you, Jaclyn, for joining us today. Please be sure to check us out each and every Friday. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. See ya, everybody. Bye.